And from the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, welcome to this episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. I am your co-host for tonight, Joe Martucci. Joined with me, the meteorologist extraordinaire, Dan Skeldon. And we have our guest for tonight, Scott Mazzella, author of Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, the second edition. We're going to talk to him all about that. It is April. Spring is here. And Dan, we've been on like Kingda Ka roller coaster ride of temperatures so far in the month of April so far.
Yeah, that's quintessential early spring, right? In New Jersey and the Northeast in general. I mean, you never know how to dress. It's 80 one day, you're stuck in the 40s the next with a wind off the water, and then it flips back right to 70s and 80s again. And, that can be our life for March, April, and sometimes even into early May. But, some would call it annoying. Some would call it charming. I guess it depends on your point of view.
I definitely don't call it charming. I'm not in the charming camp on that one. That's the thing, though. Spring isn't our time at the shore. The fall is. This is just the lumps we take to get it back later. So for our guest, like we said, we have Scott Mazzella. He is an author. He is an educator. And he is here tonight on Tidal Flooding Talk to not only talk about the book, but to talk about the Jersey Shore and how coastal flooding and development has all been relevant to our history over time. Scott, welcome to the show. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell us first about the book. Tell us about the first edition of the book as well and how you got involved in the second edition of this.
Oh, well, the first edition was from 1993, and I was 16 years old back then, and my mom got it for me as a gift, and it became my Storm Bible. I loved that book. I read it cover to cover multiple times. I wrote a book about Sandy in 2013, Surviving Sandy, focused mainly on Long Beach Island and the surrounding areas. And then, obviously, I got involved with the publisher for that. And when it came time, around 2019, he said, why don't we update Great Storms? It's been a while. So he gave me the keys, and I ran with it. So I was happy to do it.
And in Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, for people who haven't read it yet, what can they expect throughout the book? What's the elevator pitch for the book?
Oh, man. If you like the Jersey Shore, you have to have this book. I mean, this is your wall-to-wall coverage of everything Jersey Shore storms. All the big ones are in there. It has amazing photographs. I know for the original one, the publisher and the original authors, Larry Sabadov and Margaret Thomas Buchholz, poured over National Archives stuff, and they put it all in there, and there's lots of charts and data. It's like it's your Storm Bible. You got to have one for your house.
And I will say, Scott, it's just a quintessential Jersey. I think every shore house should have it, and it's interesting. Back in my South Jersey days, from 2003 to 2017, I did hundreds of appearances. I got 6 different copies of not your edition, but the first edition as thank you gifts or as welcome gifts or hey, thanks for doing this talk. So both editions adorn my coffee table now, even though I'm in Pennsylvania. Right. I still think it's just such a great book to, flip through at any time and reminisce and, see our history. And I think it speaks to how important that book is to the shore that, I'm still in possession of those 6 copies.
That's terrific. Yeah, I think it's important too because, we've had Sandy, but before that we had about 50 years of people not really experiencing a major disaster like that since 62. So it's good to have a reminder around just, to remember that you are living at the shore, and the shore is pretty much a fluid thing, and to always be prepared.
And Scott, what storms did you kind of focus on in the update? Because the first book, obviously published in the early 90s, focused on storms before then. So what was incorporated into the second edition?
The big focus was, of course, Sandy, but we hit any major nor'easter in the 90s and the 2000s. We added some more tornadic information, and I actually brought in a little bit about meteo tsunamis too, which I thought was an interesting aspect. It kind of, I don't want to call it a new science, but it's just emerging what those are and what they could do. And I actually went back and looked at some of the rogue wave stories from the original and thought maybe, who knows, maybe that was meteo tsunami related too. So there's some surprises in there, and it's not just hurricanes and nor'easters.
Yeah, and Scott, how far back do you start with the storms? Are we talking about modern history with this, or people seeing things that happened, before we really had accurate weather observations? How far back does this book go?
I mean, it hints in the beginning at 19th century storms. I know there's a quote or two from actually Alexander Hamilton, if you could believe that. So it hints at stuff before and everyone's love of weather throughout all the centuries.
Awesome. When we look at, and I should say too, I have this book as well. I have the second edition. It's not on my coffee table, unlike Dan, but it's there, and I've read it before.
Oh, Joe, you got to get on the coffee table.
I know. I got to get on the call. I'll make sure to do it after this episode. But, there are a number of books actually about Jersey Shore storms. I'm sure you've seen many of them. Were there any that you took inspiration from when you were writing this second edition?
No, I was so focused on living up to the standards set by the original that's really what I was focused on. Plus, Margaret Thomas Buchholz is a friend of mine. I knew she'd be around and wanting to see what I was doing. We had a great editor, Steve Warren, too. So I was trying to really just impress the people that impressed me. I mean, these were my heroes as a teenager, my storm heroes. So they were my focus, really, not other publications.
And then, let's get into the book, and we're going to go to break in just a minute. But I want to talk about the three main storms I believe are covered in this book, right? So we have the 1944 storm, the 1962 nor'easter, and Superstorm Sandy. When you look at all three of those storms, and you've made this point to me before, but I'd like you to share with the audience, there is kind of a change in the infrastructure, in the buildup of the shore after these three storms. How did we see that progress?
Well, you definitely see it, even if you look at the aerials that are out there, that just how many buildings are built over time. I like to say in book talks that each of those storms became a new chapter for the shore. If you look at a lot of the buildings from before 44, a lot of them were destroyed in 44, especially on the more vulnerable areas. And then you had a slew of new buildings from 44 to 62, and then you had another disastrous storm that initiated new building again, and then you had a very long period of time where you saw the Jersey Shore just explode. You had the Parkway built and everything. So Sandy hit with the most expensive type of real estate you're getting, but now we're seeing after Sandy, I was worried it was going to be like the death knell for shore towns, but instead these houses have gotten bigger and more expensive, and you're getting so much less pervious ground. So over time, you're actually losing the ability to absorb storms, and it's becoming almost more dangerous. And we're seeing more regular flooding as a result of that, and perhaps changes to the bay and the depths of the bay after Sandy.
We've seen a lot of changes, of course. I mean, Atlantic City has seen 6 times as many coastal flooding days in the 2010s as opposed to the 1950s and 60s. Sea levels have risen about 1.5 feet at the Jersey Shore since 1911. That's not a lot when you divide it by every year, but that's still 1.5 feet we've had to deal with in just a little over a century here. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We're going to take our first break here on Tidal Flooding Talk. On the other side, we're going to come back, continue our conversation with Scott Mazzella. He is the author of Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, the second edition. We'll be right back. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Well, welcome back to Tidal Flooding Talk. We are talking great storms along the Jersey Shore, and some come to mind, the ones we've been talking about: Sandy, 44, 62. I think the first great one was 1821, and I don't think many of us remember that. Probably not too many photos and pictures dating back to then. So let's focus on the recent history, Scott. And in your lifetime, what has been the most memorable storm? Is it Sandy, or is it something else?
Well, for personal experience, I guess you would have to say Sandy for sure. I was also in a tornado down in North Carolina once. That one's pretty memorable. But growing up, I was a huge fan. Not fan, that's the wrong word. But I loved reading about the 62 storm. I was just mystified about it. So I guess historically 62, but in my own life, Sandy.
And Scott, tell us what life was like at the Jersey Shore before the 1944 storm, which is your first main storm you're talking about in the book. What were the islands like? What was life like? And what was the relationship with coastal flooding back then?
I think people, in terms of coastal flooding, I think they understood that weather and risk were just a part of life at the shore. And I think you had a lot of people that built houses that were easily repairable, or they didn't mind if they took on a little damage, or they could fix them. I think it was, I want to say maybe a little more blue collar back in the day in the 40s. You had a lot of, you had the only real built up places were the towns. A lot of places between towns that you see houses everywhere now were a lot more open, a lot more natural land. I think as after 44, you saw more of an upswing in mass-produced homes. Like your Levittown kind of homes. You had much more of that along the shore, and then of course when the Parkway came, people came down in droves. I think over time people maybe lost some of that idea of what the risk was living at the shore. And you did have a period of time before 62 where a lot of houses were built on concrete blocks and things like that. And only a few had piles. When you look at 62 storm pictures, the ones that survived were the ones high on piles, and the ones that moved, like my parents' house, it wasn't theirs at the time, but it floated across the street because it was on concrete. So, of course, back then, the story goes, a guy in the truck came around and said, "You want your house put back?" And they just put it back a couple cinder blocks higher. Now, of course, with Sandy and all the building and all the red tape that goes on after a storm, it's a much more difficult and much more costly process. So I guess from 62 to 2012, you had as much land as you could covered. And like I mentioned before, you had less natural space for water to go and flooding. And you had more expensive homes. And I think you had the mindset that, storms might come, but no one had a real grasp of what that meant. Like Gary Zakowski of the National Weather Service at the time had put that personal plea out during Sandy just to remind people, hey, you want to know what's going on here? Go back to ask somebody from 62 about what it's like. And that's how he was trying to convey how dangerous Sandy was. So I think Sandy was a wake-up call. We all learned a very valuable and very tough and hard lesson with Sandy. And now we have a generation that understands what it means, I hope.
Yeah, Scott, it's something we say as meteorologists. No one wishes these storms happen. I mean, they cause devastation. Worst case scenario, they cause death. But, one of the kind of indirect positives that come out of it is it kind of wakes us up to our vulnerability. It makes us know, okay, we are not immune. And when you go decades without a storm, people let their guard down. And this, I think every generation, again, not wishing these storms upon anyone, but it's almost they serve a benefit. When these storms happen, we learn from them. We build back now. We build back stronger. We build back higher. We build back better. There's a lot more money to build back. So we have a lot more knowledge about the weather. We have a lot more knowledge about construction. So, these storms are a measuring stick for future generations. And I think they're a wake-up call to the current generation.
Absolutely, you said it perfectly. I think even though Sandy was a hard lesson, I think we have actually we might have two generations, because I know my kids were around and they were little, but they understood what was going on, and they're going to grow up remembering Sandy and they'll tell that story. But we don't hope for storms like you said, but they do serve that dual purpose, whether we like it or not.
It almost seems like, Scott, is this an accurate thing to say? Like, these major storms accelerated the development of the shore that was already ongoing.
Like, well, in a way, I guess you could say that. After 62, there were some people that wanted to put a moratorium on building in some places, but money wins usually. Real estate wins, and the opposite happened. Just like after Sandy, I thought that was going to be the end of people investing. But they invest even more. It's pretty incredible. So I guess you could say that. Yeah, I mean, what it does kind of do, which is kind of sad, is it kind of hurts the little guy. You know, that you had like Long Beach Island, I'm sure much of the shore, there were a lot more blue collar type of towns where a regular family could afford a beach house on a regular salary, and now it's pretty sky high. You have to be pretty well off to buy a beach house these days. So it tends to push out the little guy in favor of bigger, larger, more expensive homes.
Do you think, Scott, that we reach a point like so we're talking about the past. Let's just speculate for a second about the future. I mean, eventually the islands, the little guys, the 1950s or 60s cottages, are all going to be gone. It's all going to be modern construction. And let's say we get a hurricane in 20 years or another one 30 years after that. Do we reach a point where, okay, nothing's going to change because the island landscape has been completely changed and these homes are all, able to withstand. You're not going to wipe out whole neighborhoods. So do future storms have less of an impact on the Jersey Shore, perhaps?
It all depends on when the tipping point between how much it costs to fix is better than your making memories and all the love you have for the shore. That's the big thing. People don't want to lose that. But there's going to be a tipping point at some point. Either it's going to be real estate or it's going to be the government saying we're not going to pump any more sand. At some point, someone's going to say we can't do this anymore. It's not sustainable. I don't think that's going to be for a while, but I guess it depends on the kind of storms we get and what kind of events happen down the line, what kind of things happen to our climate and how that affects sea level rise and all that. So we'll see. But for now, people are willing to risk it, and I can't blame them. It's 99% of the time, it's an amazing place to be.
We say it at the Coastal Coalition. I mean, 360 days a year, it's great to come down to the shore and enjoy, right? Our economy, I think it's like an eighth of our economy is based around the Jersey Shore in New Jersey, but it's those 5 or 6 on the leap year days where we need to be weather aware and aware of the water. And a lot of times this is happening not during the summer when when the tourists are around. And that makes me at least, concerned. We do get, maybe it's not Sandy, but let's say close to Sandy during the summer where there's a lot of people there who just don't expect this to come. I just wanted to make one more point, too, before we go into our second break. You mentioned about pricing out the little guys. I mean, look at Seaside Heights. Seaside Heights was one of the last places at the Jersey Shore that you could probably afford on let's say, a regular salary. And that's changed over the past 5 years where there's a lot of high rises, expensive condos that are being built. There's still a lot of bungalows. It's not like that's it's gone yet, but give it another 10 years. I mean, it's going to be one of those, Ocean Cities or Ortley Beach or, somewhere like that. And I think, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's just tying into your point. I think it's really only like Seaside Heights at this point and like Atlantic City and parts of Ventnor where you have these middle class or, more affordable areas. That would be my thought on all this. We're going to take a break, though. We have to cut the break. We'll be right back on the other side. We'll continue this conversation on the New Jersey Coastal Coalition's Tidal Flooding Talk. We are back with Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and our partners at Triax 57, who puts this video together and puts it on their streaming news network for the Jersey Shore. We appreciate that. We appreciate Scott being here and chatting with us for our last segment. I wanted to go back from what I was saying at the end with these affordability places or these places that are becoming less affordable. You know, it's a seller's market. If you have that bungalow, right, you can sell and make good money out of it. But it's bringing in people who are new to the shore. And I think you were kind of saying this before, and I don't want to speak on behalf of you, but you kind of, if you get these big mega mansions with the big stilts and everything, you kind of lose that touch with nature with the shore that you might see if you're really hanging out in the bungalow there. But here's my question. Going forward, what I see at the shore's development is you see places like Long Branch and Asbury Park and Ocean City's trying to do this, where these are becoming like little cities. They're not just, it's becoming medium or high density housing at this point in some of these towns. In my point of view, I think if/when another major storm like Sandy was to come, that's what happens to those homeowners. You know, if those homes unfortunately get washed away or whatever happens, the town might rezone and you start building up because there's a lot of money to be made in that from a town's perspective. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? What's your thought?
It could happen. I mean, especially near those higher density regions. It depends on, I guess, what the people want. If there's a big, huge backlash against the people who already live there that fight against those zoning changes, maybe not. But I mean, everything's getting more expensive, right? So you build bigger, or you build more rateables and things like that. I mean, they might chase that higher revenue sources. More people mean more money. They're spending money on restaurants and amusements, so it definitely could happen. So houses are getting built higher, and they have breakaway walls on the bottom, so they can withstand storms better. So people are more comfortable investing in these bigger homes too. So, yeah, I mean, it could result in a much different looking Jersey Shore down the line. But just like it was different before Sandy, before 62, and before 44, it's just that you always love the one you're in, right? The era you're in, and then a new one comes along and you get all, I'll be that angry old man going, I remember when things were, we all have our time, and someday the shore will look different than what we're used to, and a new generation of people will enjoy that one. We'll just complain from the sides.
There you go.
I fully agree. And like, yeah, I think you kind of like the shore that you experience and you don't like change. And, you know, while some of the locals now are saying, oh, I miss the bungalow days, 20 years from now, you know, the same residents might say, oh, I miss those big, you know, McMansion type days, you know, because it does go to the next iteration, whatever that's going to be. And it's not a matter of if, you know, I think, Joe, I never ever correct you. All right. I'm just going to modify what you said. You said if or well, I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that next one hits. You know, it could be this year, it could be 100 years from now. Most likely it's probably somewhere in between, but you know it's going to come. It's just what type of storm is it going to be? Is it going to be a 62 type of like slow moving nor'easter, or is it going to be a hard hitting hurricane, or is it going to be something else? But you know it's coming, and we spend these quiet seasons, which is 99% of the time, to prep for that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, we do have at the Jersey Shore, I believe it's about a 7 or 8% chance of being hit with a hurricane, or at least being within 50 miles of a hurricane in any given year. That's according to Colorado State University, who puts out one of the preeminent hurricane forecasts that we'll discuss in due time as well here on the show. But you know, it's you know, we could always talk about the Jersey Shore forever and ever and ever. I mean, there's so many things to talk about. The storms is just one part of the history, and you know, you got to take the good with the bad, and the bad is the storms. But you do have those memories that are always so positive, and we love always forever here. Scott, what else
I
can you
wanted
tell
to circle back
us?
to one thing. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to circle back to one thing because you said you explored it a little bit in the second edition of your book, and a lot of people probably don't recognize the term, or at least half the term, the medio tsunami that you talked about as well. Want to elaborate a little bit into that and what that does and what you found out when you did your research on that relatively newly, you know, coined phenomena?
Yeah, it came from a story of a large wave that came through Barnegat Inlet and knocked a bunch of people off the jetty and stuff. And it turned out that I don't know if it was a derecho or it was a series of strong storms that went off the coast, and these big, powerful clusters of thunderstorms create almost like a little low pressure that bows the surface of the water, which makes a ripple. Now, most of the time, you might see a slightly bigger wave on the beach. You may, that one little wave that came up a little higher than the rest. But if you're right at the right angle, it could really amplify the wave, and that's what happened at Barnegat Light. And conversely, this at the opposite angle in New England, the same thing happened to an inlet there that was on the opposite angle. So, I guess the shore, they are monitoring for rogue or larger waves and wave heights all the time. I guess it's something they're exploring. I'm just curious, and it wasn't really a focus of the book, so I didn't dig that far into it, but how many rogue wave stories are really that, because it's nice and sunny where these happen because the storms are long gone, but it takes a while for that wave to get back, and if we can monitor that and warn people ahead of time that there's this chance of this wave coming in, we might not have injuries like we saw in Barnegat Light.
Yeah. All right. Well, Scott, great conversation. We're not going to let you go just yet because we still have our final segment, but where can people buy the book and where can they see more about you?
Well, I mean, you'd have to be a 7th grade history teacher in Old Bridge or history student in Old Bridge to see me. But I do book talks around the state. You got to watch out. If you are a group that would like me to come talk, I'm always willing to do that. So Down the Shore Publishing publishes the book. You could get it through them, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and many different mom and pop bookshops on the shore, which I always encourage people to buy it from those too. So you can find it around, and I hope you do. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap up, we're going to do our segment here. What's the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise? Scott, as our guest, the floor is yours.
Well, I got to give a shout out to my students.
Of course.
At Superstorm Middle School and all the Old Bridge staff and students up there. I just want to say hello to them. And they have to listen to my storm stories every so often. So they put up with me too.
Awesome. Dan, what do you got?
I got baseball. That's not tidal flooding talk related, but April baseball. Love the start of the season. Red Sox fan. I know I'm in enemy territory here. I love spring baseball weather. It could be snowing, it could be 80, it could be anything in between. But just love the start of baseball season. A sure sign of spring.
How do you feel about Garrett Crochet's 6-year extension?
Undecided at this point.
Undecided. Okay.
Yeah, jury's still out. We'll see.
Okay, he's on my fantasy baseball team.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't know if that means anything, but I'll take it. I'm going to keep it in sports too. I think I've done this like 3 episodes in a row, but I finally went to my first Flyers game on March 31st, and I have to say it was very nice. Wells Fargo Center was beautiful. The food options looked good. It was clean in there. The parking's close, but the problem was it was Phillies opening day as well. And the Phillies game was ending as the Flyers game was starting, so it was like parking lot catastrophe trying to get in there. But once we got there, we enjoyed. The Flyers won, which probably isn't a good thing for Flyers fans, but it was nice to be there in a winning environment. So that's what I have for this one.
Someone has to say Devils now.
What's that, Scott?
Someone has to bring the Devils in now. So, yeah, the Prue Center.
That's it. Well, listen, I like the Prue Center better than Wells Fargo. I agree with you there. Prue Center is like one of my favorite arenas, period. It's great. Prudential Center, love it there. Anyway, we are going to wrap it up for this edition of Tidal Flooding Talk. We thank Scott Mazzella for coming on. You can find new episodes every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on your favorite social media platform or on YouTube. And then you can always stream it later whenever you'd like as well. We'll look forward to talking to you soon. We'll be back with you next week with a new edition of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and Tri-X 57.